decided to choose for this assignment was kayaking and paddleboarding. Okay, so the forwards paddle. Good posture is key and essential if you are to use your body efficiently when kayaking. You have to sit straight, relax your shoulders and open your chest for ease of breathing to make it more comfortable for yourself. Your torso will do most of the work and your shoulders and arms are only there to transmit the power. You have to pull yourself to and past the paddle when it is in the water and place the paddle near your feet. Keep your lower arm almost straight, your upper arm should be relaxed and slightly bent. Your torso should be coiled tight. Uncoil your torso and keep the lower arm nearly straight. Generate more power at the start of the stroke than at the end. Then you can create power from your torso instead of your arms, making it easier to paddle for long periods of time. Your upper arm should remain relaxed. Allow your upper body to move across your body. Allow your upper arm to move across your body to keep the paddle vertical. End the stroke with your lower hand at about level with your side and remove the blade at the back and away from the kayak. Lift it out by leading the movement with your elbow. Don't lift your elbow above shoulder height, otherwise your arm will tire really quickly. When removed, keep coiling your torso so as to prepare for the next stroke. Repeat the stroke on the other side and you should be okay. In my kayaking experience, I have found that for this manoeuvre to be successful, it is key to remain with a good posture. It is best to sit straight, relax your shoulders and breathe calmly, otherwise you really will tire quickly. Also, I have found that if my torso rotation was not efficient, then it would put a large amount of strain on my arm muscles and I would tire quickly and not be able to continue. It is also important to maintain an effective paddle angle for the best possible power transfer for the manoeuvre. Okay, so the forward paddle in paddleboarding. Keep your arms relatively straight with a slight bend at the elbow. Maintain the correct posture, straight back with your knees soft and slightly bent to avoid much strain. Do not hunch over, others you will start to ache. Think about the power coming from your core rather than your upper body and arms. Extend your arms as far forward as you can, easily reach and fully submerge the blade. Pull the blade paddle backwards towards your feet, keeping the paddle as straight as possible as this will propel you more. Switch sides with your paddle and reverse the hand positions. Throughout this technique, keep your arms as straight as possible. This will give the best power transfer. Okay, from my paddleboarding experience, I have found that for the manoeuvre to be successful, I have to remember to keep the paddle as vertical as possible so that it will give me the best power transfer. I also have to complete the technique by rotating my torso instead of using my arms. This will mean that my arm muscles don't get strained and tire easily. As well as this, keeping the paddle close to the board is effective as it reduces the rotation of the board throughout my stroke, meaning I can go in a straight line. So comparing the two sports for the forward stroke. In both kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding, it is important to create and maintain the correct posture. If you do not, then it will make it harder to perform the different strokes and skills and also make you tire quickly. In both, your torso will do most of the work when completing a forward stroke and your arms and shoulders will only act as a power transfer. Also, when completing a forward stroke in both of these water sports, you have to remember you are pulling yourself to the paddle, not the paddle to yourself. This is because it creates the best result for the stroke. Another comparison is that your arms should remain relatively straight but relaxed. This allows you to paddle for long periods as your arm muscles do not have any strain on them, meaning your arms should not tire quickly. Okay, so the sculling draw in kayaking. This technique is really effective if you wish to move closer to something, whether it is a dock or a friend's kayak. It is a harder technique, but is the best way to move your kayak sideways whilst keeping balance. Hold your paddle in a normal forward paddling grip, rotate your torso to the side and place the paddle almost vertically in the water. Your upper arm should be bent and kept high. Make sure the power face of the blade is facing towards the kayak. Move the paddle back and forth parallel to the kayak whilst turning the power face of the blade slightly in the direction of the sweep. It will draw the kayak to the paddle. Keep your upper hand in a relatively fixed position. Start moving the blade in the water with your lower arm creating the movement. Try to keep the movement fluent. Move the paddle so that it forms a figure of 8 in the water. Okay, so I'm going to draw a quick picture just to show what I mean. So that's the kayak, and then you have your paddle which goes here, and there's the rest of the water. And then you have your little person sat in here with his upper arm quite high, and there's the other end of the blade, paddle, whatever you want to call it. And then this paddle part of the blade will go both that way and that way, forming a figure of 8 on its side in the water, which then draws the kayak to the paddle that way. Okay, whilst I have been trying this technique, I have found it fairly difficult. Some of the key points I have to remember is to only place the blade in the surface of the water and not to submerge it too much, otherwise the manoeuvre is not effective. I also have to keep my upper arm high to create the appropriate angle on the blade. This will also help me to maintain my balance when completing this technique. It is also important to resist the blade's urge to slice through the water. The power face must have an angle on it for this technique to be completed. Okay, so the crossbow turn in paddleboarding. To turn right, you have to paddle on the left-hand side of the board. Twist your torso to the right, bringing the blade of your paddle across the nose of your board. Rotate your torso so that you remain comfortable, then place the blade in the water and use the power face of the blade to sweep towards the nose of your board to bring it around. To turn left, paddle on the right side of the board. Without switching your hands, turn your torso as far as you can to the left. You will always turn the opposite direction to the side you are paddling on. Okay, so this is my little paddle boarder, and he's going to demonstrate a crossbow turn. He's paddling on the left-hand side of the board, and this will then mean that he wants to turn right. So he's then going to bring his paddle across to the other side of the board by sweeping it across the front without changing his hand positions. He's then going to have his paddle in the water on this side with his arms on it, and he's going to bring his paddle, he's going to sweep it towards the nose of his board. This will then bring the front around and swing the back that way, meaning that he can turn to the right. Okay, in my experience of the crossbow turn, I have found that if I was to wish to make it easier to turn, then it is important to remember the further I place the blade away from the nose of the board, the easier it will be. For a more successful crossbow turn, submerge the blade fully in the water, make an arc in the water towards the nose of your board, as you would normally. When it reaches the nose, however, remove it from the water, move it back across the nose and submerge it on the other side, continuing the arc on that side, moving towards the tail of the board. This allows a full 180-degree rotation. Okay, so comparing and contrasting the crossbow turn and the sculling draw. These two techniques have different purposes. The sculling draw in kayaking is used if the participant wishes to face the same direction but to move sideways. However, the crossbow turn is for when the participant wishes to turn and change direction. Although they have different outcomes, some of the processes involved are the same. For example, in both of these skills, it is important to rotate your torso for the manoeuvre to be effective. Another difference in these two skills is that the sculling draw takes place at the side of the kayak, whereas the crossbow turn is completed at the nose or the bow of the board. Okay, so the forward sweep in kayaking. This is a slight modification to the forward paddle stroke. It is good to use as a primary turning technique as it does not slow you down and it is easy to maintain your paddling momentum. It can be done when stationary or with momentum. Hold the paddle in the same way as for a forward stroke. Place the paddle in the water as far forward as you can easily reach and keep the power face of the paddle pointing away from the kayak. Start doing a big arc that starts close to the bow and ends at the rear. No, not at the rear, at the stern. Do this by rotating your torso but otherwise keeping your posture as still as possible. At the start of the stroke, the bow is pushed away from the paddle. At the end, the stern is pulled closer to the paddle. The kayak will turn the opposite side of the stroke. Okay, so the sweep stroke in paddleboarding. This is a technique to turn your board. It is useful if you wish to turn your board on the spot or to use as a course corrector. It can be completed as a forward sweep from nose to tail or as a reverse sweep from tail to nose. Bend your knees a little more than you would for a forward stroke and remember to rotate your torso with the movement. Push the paddle away from the board, leading with the power face of the blade. You want to draw an arc along the side of your board in the water. If stationary, you can use forward sweeps and reverse sweeps alternatively to turn your board on the spot. However, if you have forward momentum and perform a reverse sweep, you will lose most of your momentum as it will act as a brake. The forward sweep allows you to maintain a forward momentum when you turn. If you perform a forward sweep stroke on the right hand side of the board, it will turn you left and vice versa. Okay, so from my experience, I have found that to perform the sweep stroke in paddleboarding successfully, it is important to stay upright so that my balance is maintained. If I start to hunch over and lean too much, it becomes very hard to stay on the board. You have to maintain the correct posture. The key thing to remember is to keep the paddle blade fully in the water, as I have found that if the blade is too near the water's surface, then the technique is not effective. Okay, so comparing and contrasting the two sweep strokes. Again, both of these skills are very similar on these two water sports. This is because both the outcomes and the execution of the technique is the same. In these sports, you have to rotate your torso to be able to get the most power behind your stroke, making the turn more effective. Also, in both of these activities, you can perform a forward sweep and a reverse sweep. In doing so, it is possible to turn your kayak or paddleboard on the spot by alternating between the two sweeps. In addition to this, in both kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding, if a forward sweep is completed, then there is little to no forward momentum lost. Okay, goodbye and thank you for watching my video on skills in water-based activities.